So, hello all. Welcome to the Reverie Roundtable, which we have Mondays at 8 p.m. Eastern. We got a great group of individuals here. Excited to talk to them. If you're watching us on YouTube, please like, comment, and subscribe. because they're hitting that join button on YouTube. Becoming a YouTube member, supporting us that way if you like getting this content on a regular basis. All right. So we are going to start with our friend Wick. Wick is here with us. Wick is back because I can't quit him. So Wick, thank you.
I know that reference.
Yes, when we talk about addiction and when we talk about lack of control and loss of control, it's not just the substances, gang. There can be real psychological addictions to personalities as well. And I think this is a great example. No matter how much we yell and scream at each other, right? We still love each other, and that's okay. We're addicted. We're addicted to each other, and that's fine. But yeah, thank you for having me. Thanks for these topics are pretty good. I'm very excited to go over them, and yeah, so glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. Next we have K-O-E. My man Phil is back with us to make my day, as he does literally every time I have him around. Phil, please.
Folks, I just have one question for you all at home. I have one question for you. Are you ready? Folks, I can't hear you out there. Are you ready? Let's get ready to reverie. Folks, I am the devilishly handsome outlaw himself, your king of extreme, the man of the hour, the man with the power, the man that makes the other podcast cower, the prince and potentate of the political parlance, the lord of the Scottish Highlands, and one damn handsome man if I do say so myself, Phil, K-O-E, the king of extreme, which you can find at KOE Nation on YouTube, KOE Nation on Twitch, and KOE Nation on TikTok. That's K as in king. O as in, oh my God, you can find KOE Nation on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch? E is an extremely happy to know. You can find KOE Nation on YouTube, TikTok, and Twitch, folks. This is all very on brand. Of course, right after you subscribe to PrimeCayes right here on YouTube, every minute, every second, every millisecond you do not subscribe to both of those YouTube channels, you're leaving intellectual money on the table, folks. This is going to be an interesting topic where we get into the topics of the day with all you beautiful people and all your feedback, and I cannot wait to get into them. And folks, these lips of mine, they can speak no evil. And with that, I yield back to all you beautiful people.
He's so great. I love him.
Could you imagine if he was gay? Like if he had that gay charisma on top, it'd be unstoppable.
I've been told I have like day trader coke energy.
I imagine that he's gay all the time.
Day trader coke energy.
Okay, yeah, great. So let's go to our friend Sprouticus. Sprouticus, I need you to keep up the energy that Phil's putting out, all right?
Yeah, I'm glad I don't have to follow that.
I mean, mine's gonna go the exact opposite way, but I'm actually gonna forego my introduction, just in remembrance of there was a mass shooting 20 minutes away from me, so I'm gonna forego my introduction in remembrance of that.
Oh, okay. Well, that's
okay.
I forego my introduction. Go ahead. It's fine.
Fair enough. Okay. All right.
Check out Sprouticus on all platforms.
I hope everyone is well. Thank you, B. Dander, for the kind donation. Holy crap, B. Dander, much appreciated. Thank you for the $20. If you sent the message, I gotta hold on, look it up. If you sent the message, I'm not sure if you did. But while I do that, we will hit up our friend Corey Campbell. Corey is back with us. Nice to have you there in your soft purple bisexual lighting, I guess.
Bisexual.
Spread the word.
Yeah.
Ambiguously gay.
Ambiguously gay.
Duo. Where's my duo? But yeah, thank you so much, Brian, for reaching out. Much appreciated. Never take it for granted. And yeah, I echo Wick's sentiment. I think, as always, great topics, and I look forward to discussing these. I'm Corey Campbell, PhD candidate in biochemistry. You can find me twitch.tv, CoreyCampbell84, and on Twitter and Instagram, literally, it's Corey Campbell. I'm looking forward to it.
Okay. Being Dander, you just sent me some emotes, but I appreciate it. Emotes with money, the best kind of emotes. No, thank you though. Seriously, it's awfully kind of you. Thank you for the support. Okay. Next we will go to our friend Aiko. Aiko, hey, is new to any of our closed panels, right? He's new to the Reverie. You've seen him on open panels. He was just with us on Saturday. And he's been with us for past 2 nights, and I've really, really enjoyed talking to him. So I had to hit him up, and I was very, very happy when he agreed. So Aiko, please tell the world about yourself.
Yeah. Well, there's not a whole lot to know. Used to be a network engineer back in the day, quit to do for a living what I used to do as a hobby, which is high school debate coach. And I found myself I've been doing that for 35 years. So, debate is usually strictly about like playing logic games, which, you can get tired of pretty fast. I found that debates here or on the Twitch space, generally speaking, are very different. And I'm very new to that format, and I just kind of want to like sort of dip my toes in it and see if I can, learn a few new skills myself.
You hear that, everyone? All right, to the rest of the panel, this is a real debater. Not like you fucking posers.
No,
that have been-
Are you going to coach me debate, Daddy? Are you going to coach me debate, Daddy?
I can.
All right. Okay. So back to the posters. LSP, thank you for being around, for coming through. LSP is a good friend of the channel, well, friend of me, really. But thanks for being around, buddy.
You're welcome.
Okay. All right. Moving on. We have Scott. Fabian Livy Scott is here. He's down below there with the rest of the non-loyals, right? So Scott, thank you for stopping by.
Yeah, I'm super non-loyal. I'd totally never show up to these. So I'm a Scott from Fabian Liberty. We're an anarcho-capitalist duo stream. We do news, reactions, we do some debates, look into some stories, we do some philosophy readings from time to time. Thursday, we will be doing our once a month serial killer night. Who's the killer? Took too long. We're gonna keep going. Sorry, but you got to come over and follow the channel and be on the Discord, I guess, to figure out who it is. We've been doing a lot of interviews lately. Yes, because there's so many super famous black serial killers. So we been doing a lot of interviews lately. Tuesday we'll be interviewing John Cochran of no relation, running in for the LP, running on the LP ticket in Alabama. But next Wednesday, not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday, we will be speaking to Yaron Brook, chairman of the Ayn Rand Institute, famous individualist capitalist, and super famous in terms of objectivist, probably the second most famous objectivist in the world, second probably only to Leonard Peikoff. So I'm super excited about that interview next Wednesday, not this Wednesday. Come check it out.
Thank you. Everyone, please check out his channel. And then last but honestly one of the best, we have our Dark Lord.
Fuck? All right, whatever.
Our Dark Lord and Savior, Doobie.
Hi, I'm Doobie.
Okay, all right, really inspired. See, this Kaylee, this is why you literally do have to go last, right? Like these.
I know.
Maybe if you wouldn't call us posers, we'd actually give you some shit, Prime. Dick. No one to blame but yourself.
Don't get me wrong. Whenever you say Prime's like, God, you are so hard to follow, I'm like, well, I just think that. I don't say that last part out loud. I know.
I need to learn how to get as succinct as Doobie.
Okay, let's get started.
A lot of cocaine.
Cocaine for Doobie? All right. So, like, he's like he's one of the chillest people here.
Oh, I'm sorry. A lot of heroin. That's what I meant.
Okay. All right.
Choose your line.
Topic 1. In the West, there is a housing crisis. People are finding it increasingly difficult to rent and buy housing. A recent article in the Jacobin argues that solving the problem requires more public housing rather than more home ownership. Do you agree? Should we move away from the idea that owning a home is a right and move to a model of housing as a right through public means? Or do you believe that housing isn't a right at all, Should we look outside of the market for solutions to the crisis, or is the market the only way? Yeah. So I thought it was a really interesting article, and trying to turn the way we look at housing on its head, especially here in the States, since other countries have a very different models of like, insuring housing, all right, or not even insuring it, but just providing it in general. Is our home ownership the idea that everyone has to have a home that's part of the American dream, that you necessarily own a plot of land? Is that part of the problem here? Can we find other solutions? So we'll start with my man Wick.
Okay, so yeah, this goes into a lot, and there's a very heated debate between two different groups, right? The YIMBYs and the NIMBYs, as they say. The yes in my backyards versus the not in my backyards. The not in my backyards would characterize themselves more as housing justice, searching for housing justice, but the YIMBYs have kind of co-opted that label for a bit. When we talk about housing, right? The only solution, at least in the capitalist system in which we exist now, it has to be primarily a market solution, right? We have to have more supply, right? We have to get rid of the red tape surrounding putting up new housing developments in certain areas. We have to expand our focus on subsidizing housing, right? We have to remove a lot of the red tape when it comes to that. And there's a lot we can do. And that's where I stand on these things. I'm very much a YIMBY when it comes to these things. I'm very much for building up more homes and walkable, livable cities and things like that. I do not think that necessarily precludes private individual homeownership, right? Especially in rural areas and things like that. But I think that moving towards a more communal model in this case and giving market incentives for that is probably the way forward. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Next, Phil.
Thank you, sir. I will say, first and foremost, setting aside the fact that the Jacobin is a self-admitted socialist publication, so the idea that a socialist publication thinks that we should move to a more socialist method of organizing our housing is not at all that surprising to me. But setting that aside for a moment, really where you get to this problem is, and we often saw this in COVID, was the diminishing returns of having very, very compact metropolitan areas, especially when everyone can work from home. We're starting to get a big diminishing return on that. And the reason why we're having these problems of everything seeming so cramped and compact is also the reason why we're having a housing crisis, is because we've got 98% of the human population trying to live on about 3% of the Earth's landmass. New York, LA, Sydney, Tokyo, take your pick, all these major cities. So, I mean, come out to Nebraska. There's plenty of fucking room out here. There's plenty of places that you could build housing. To me, I've often said that rights are the necessary conditions of one's proper existence. And much like a right to self-defense and being able to repel threats to yourself and others is a necessary condition of one's proper existence, you have the right to have a gun to defend yourself. You don't have a right to be given and provided one. And it's an unfortunate reality that we have in this life is, you are given life, you are not given the amenities to support this life. And on the promise of escaping people from this basic reality, brutes have risen to power. So whenever we have this idea of, hey, there's a better way, and we just have to avoid the basic rules and laws of reality, if you just go, now do I think we should have more public housing and low-income housing for people who need it? Absolutely. And the places that need those the most, could we expand it? Yes. Is there ever sufficient amount for everybody in need? No. That's the unfortunate reality, is you're always going to play whack-a-mole when you're trying to help those in need. And Fabian, actually, one thing I just want to say as a side to you, because you talk about anarcho-capitalism. I've often thought, when I was younger and I used to talk in ANCAP's circles, I thought, if the first question out of everybody's mouth wasn't, well, how are the poor going to be taken care of? I would think ANCAP is completely impossible. If that wasn't the first question out of people's mouths. But the fact that that is at least gives me a little bit of hope for our humanity. So I just want to reiterate one last time before I hand it off, folks. You are given life. Double love to you, my man. Double love to you. But you're given life. You're not given the amenities to support this life. And with that, I yield.
Thank you so much. All right. Next, Spartacus.
Yeah, so I think I think that I'm not against public housing on the small part. I'm against public housing being the way that we the way that we develop housing in general. I'm against that. I think that homeownership should still be where we should like strive to be. Renting and homeownership. You can see major public housing failures, like in Chicago when they built the high rises that were the public housing. Those majorly failed in Chicago. Regarding that, even when Wick says that like that the private properties should be built up, building up has proven to been a failure over and over and over again. Unless you live in a very compact city like New York City, like in the inner city, that's the only time that a building up solution has ever actually been found. And so the single family households, like we have now in the majority of the country, is the way to go. We should continue to build those, and I think that we should build public housing for people that are homeless. I think that homeless deserve to be underneath the roof, and I think that we can definitely afford to build houses for homeless, and we should do that.
Let's go to Corey Campbell.
Yeah. So first of all, I will say I really like the article because firstly, it started by mentioning a Canadian in the first sentence, albeit, a conservative Canadian, but a Canadian nonetheless. So, kudos to you, Prime, for more Canadian content. But I would reframe it as in like personally, like the concept of home ownership as a right, I would reject, and I would personally reframe it as, I think you have a right to a decent livable shelter without getting too bogged down in the weeds of what exactly decent livable shelter means. But I do think there is a limit, like what exactly is a home? Does that mean a mansion, etc., etc.? And yeah, when it comes to things that I would characterize as fairly critical to survival, I'm generally in favor of policies or things that minimize market forces or just markets in general, because at least in my opinion, I don't think markets are the best way at distributing things that are crucial and essential for survival. And I consider shelter as part of that. And I'm sure there'll be a strong disagreement when it comes to that. And also to sort of address something that KOE brought up, talking about rights and sort of the logic that they put forth of, well, yes, you have a right to own a gun, but you don't have a right for that gun to be provided with you. I would reject that logic because this is more or less how conservatives get around sort of when abortion was a right at one point in the United States, where it's like, sure, you have a right to an abortion, but you don't actually have rights to an abortion clinic or health services to get that. And so rights often become useless if you don't have the means to exercise them. That holds true to some extent in Canada, where, yes, we have a right to healthcare, but that is meaningless to many people if you're living in a rural area and there's literally like one health clinic or one hospital. And so, like, yes, I think in some context, you do have a right to those means to exercise those things. And I'll stop it there.
Okay. Next, please, Echo.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm basically a soc dem, but the way I see it, that means I'm a liberal essentially. And as a liberal, that means I have to look to capitalism. I have to look to markets first for solutions, and then whatever solutions that it fails to provide, that's when government steps in and sort of like fills in those cracks. At least that's kind of the way I see the world. But when I look at housing, I see two things that are unusual. Like everybody remembers from economics class, right? You have the supply curve and the demand curve, and where they meet in the middle, you have this sort of ideal price, right? Where the equilibrium,
supply equilibrium, yeah.
Yeah, where the equilibrium has been reached, right? But sometimes you have problems. You have problems when the demand curve is inelastic and when the supply curve is inelastic, which basically means it doesn't respond to market pressures, at least not as easily as maybe in a lot of other markets. And I think in housing, what we're seeing is relatively inelastic supply curve, right? That is to say, as more and more property gets bought up, things get more expensive and it's more and more difficult to then sort of find that ideal price if that line isn't moving. But also you have a demand curve that I would argue is even more inelastic, right? Everybody needs housing. You can't just decide rationally, well, I'm not going to have a place to live, right? You need that. So you have two lines that are less elastic than we would like them to be. Now there are some, potential solutions to that. Like, for instance, with skyscrapers, you can you sort of invent real estate as you go up, right? That was one way of mitigating. I wouldn't say it solves the problem, but mitigating that problem. You've got countries now that are starting to like build sort of floating islands that they can, add more real estate onto. You have like here in the Dallas area where I live, we started learning how to take highways that are moving, through towns and sort of like put real estate on top of those highways by burying those highways. That creates a little bit more real estate. Those are all if we can solve the population problem, which in the first world, you seem to be having some shrinking population, or at least pressures that are pushing that down, then your ratio of demand to supply sort of favorably changes. So there are some opportunities in the markets to sort of mitigate these problems. I'm sure Fabian especially is going to point to more obvious solutions that markets can solve with. But I don't think any of the stuff that I've just mentioned is enough to solve for the elasticity problem in these markets. And because of that, I'm open to anything government can do to create its own mitigations. And I don't entirely know what those are yet. I'm willing to listen to people on the panel as to what that might be, but I'm not walking into the panel with all the answers.
What? You don't? Get the fuck out of here, then. Oh, sorry. Invite rescinded.
Don't worry,
sorry,
I did.
I apologize, everyone. Someone here doesn't think they have all the answers. Okay, all right. LSP's making an arts and crafts project. That's really nice.
Yeah. I like to draw.
It's a house blueprint. He's gonna solve the housing crisis.
I'm doing it right now.
That makes sense. All right, LSP, please, loose your beautiful hands.
I pretty much agree with what Rick said. I do want to tag on to, like, I kind of like to idealize that there's both a market solution and a public solution that you can simultaneously tackle on two fronts. A market solution to expand the supply of housing, and a public solution for addressing people's needs who can't afford housing. I don't think these are mutually compatible. That said, I want to comment on Phil's logic for something, because it's just like the most triggering thing, because I hear it all the time. This idea that, like, oh, you have a right to something, but you don't have to be provided that to have the right to it. Phil, imagine if the government just banned all gun sales, right? They're not, you don't have a right to be provided for it. So, what could you bitch about? If you got a gun, great, but you don't have a right to be provided a gun. So they just banned all gun sales. Like, would you like want to live in that world? Like, no. If you have a right to something, you should have access to it, and reasonable access. If you don't have reasonable access to a certain right, then you don't really have that right. This applies to healthcare. This applies to housing. This applies to a lawyer. This applies to police. This applies to schools. Okay, that's it. That's all I got.
Thank you.
Having access to it does not imply being automatically provided, but thank you.
Next, okay, we're gonna go to Scott and look, Scott. We already know how you feel about this, right?
My God.
Our friend Scott is
I'm just so triggered
for public investments. He loves it. Right. And so we already know what your answer is going to be, but still, I want to be fair to everyone. So
I don't think you know where I'm going to take this. So first of all, positive rights are bullshit. And Milo Minneapolis, as we will now call him now, just made the dumbest fucking argument I've ever heard, which is the state violates your negative rights to being able to freely purchase firearms, and then tries to use that as somehow an argument for positive rights. Like, that's just fucking stupid. But regardless, let's actually get into the housing argument here. So housing isn't a right, obviously, because it's a positive right. California has been trying to solve this with public, housing programs since 1982. Hasn't really worked out for them in the last 40 years. The problem's only gotten worse. For example, we saw in 2021, the unintended consequences of state intervention. In St. Paul, Minnesota, they capped rent increases at 3% per year. And of course, they saw 80% reduction in 2021 in new housing permits, and they almost doubled in Minneapolis, because that's what fucking happens when the government comes in with rent control. And so now what we have is the failures of the market, right? Market failures that are mostly caused by state regulation and rent control and things of this nature, where the government caused the fucking problem to begin with. Now they want more government to solve the problem that they fucking caused. They caused this problem with massive amounts of regulation. That's a major part of the YIMBY movement, the yes in my backyard, because in California, it's impossible to build apartment buildings because they're fucking illegal. And if they're not illegal, you have to jump through so many hoops in order to get them done that it's exceedingly expensive, because the government forces you to not be able to build housing. In San Francisco, for example, there are like abandoned factories that people, developers, want to turn into apartment buildings, and they've been jumping through hoops for half of a decade without being able to get the building permits to legally build apartment buildings so that you could have cheaper housing. And so they say, well, now we need public housing. Well, what is public housing? Public housing is welfare. And welfare, as we know, is the oppressor of the poor. It is a systemic racism. That is what it is. It is designed to help keep Black communities down, and to oppress Black people as well as other low socioeconomic status people, and to force them into horrible conditions. But you say that and you go, but it's money specifically for these people. How could it possibly do that? Well, let's look at what public housing actually does. You see, public housing is only available to the most poor. And so one of the things it does is it reinforces single parent households. It is the government incentivizing with finances, just like a sugar tax or a nicotine tax, or, you know, some type of tax that the left loves to change behavior, because they admit that the state can use money and taxes as a form of changing behavior. But somehow magically that doesn't happen with welfare. And it creates public housing, which are units that are almost exclusively full of single mother households and low socioeconomic status. And what happens, of course, when you congregate poor people without fathers in the home is you get crime, you get issues of that nature. They hate commerce, right? So in places like New York, for example, large apartment complexes that aren't public housing, they often have businesses at the bottom, and they have communities that work together to protect those businesses, and the business and the attraction and the other people that it brings in creates a symbiotic relationship that reduces crime and helps everyone and allows the apartments to be cheaper. But public housing doesn't do that. And so when you start incentivizing single mother household income, you start engaging in rent control, you start engaging in public housing, and you don't get rid of the regulations, what you end up with is a housing crisis. That is that the government caused this, and now they want to sell you the solution. And, I offer one question to anybody here, because I guess I'm just kind of curious. Other than me, has anyone actually ever lived in Section 8? Has anyone here actually lived in the projects? I'm just curious. Anyone else?
Camden, New Jersey. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So you understand how horrible these fucking places are.
There are definitely problems, but we have opening statements, so we'll get into it.
Okay. All right. I definitely didn't know where you're going to take this. I mean, finding out you're champion of Black people. All right. Thank you.
It's that 12% of me coming out.
We're looking out for you, Prime. We're looking out.
Dark Lord and Savior Doobie, please.
Actually, just about everything Scott said, but plus, I think that there's like an obsession that a lot of people have with staying on the coast of the U.S., where and therefore they see houses for like 1,200 square foot is like $500,000 for this shitty little condo or something, where there are massive parts of the country, middle America, where you can get a fucking 2-story house for $100,000. Right, so the housing crisis is on the coast, right? It's where people are concentrated. If we had people, if people came to the understanding that the rest of America is America too, and they can also live there and find work, right, and have a family, and not need to pay fucking $500,000 for a shitty 1-bedroom house, where they're surrounded by smog and traffic all day, then I think this wouldn't be as big of a deal. I don't think that public housing is the right solution for every reason Scott just laid out. I think he did it beautifully. But I also think that we need to kind of tackle that obsession that people have with living on the coast.
Hey, Doobie, don't you live on the West Coast?
I do, but this is an accident of birth. Okay,
I mean,
I live in California.
But you
If-
are.
That's the vast majority of
you're
people.
pretty
do
well
this.
set
They're
on
all
Doobie.
accidents
You
of
can
birth.
hold on.
at any point in
Here's
time.
the issue, though. Here's the issue.
The issue is Doobie's rich.
Part
So
of
it doesn't bother.
Part of the reason I've stayed in California for the time being, I do plan to move out eventually.
You get moved to Texas.
It's because I own homes here, multiple homes that I'm renting out to people, and I'm charging them away. I'm charging them to pay for my mortgage while I take off some off the top. Okay, that's why I stay here. Okay, it's very lucrative for me.
Chad.
It's a big part of the problem as a landlord. Okay. All right. So open up to the panel.
I got some thoughts, right? Like we talk about these problems with public housing, right? And they are problems. Again, there are some serious issues with how those are handled, with how those are run. And one of the issues is how destitute you have to be in order to get access to them. But the solution to that isn't to eliminate public housing. It's to reinvigorate it, reform it, and to expand access and who qualifies for this type of subsidy. And I think that also another issue that we're kind of leaving that Fabian touched on briefly was the exclusionary zones, or what they're called, right? Like you can't have certain types of housing in certain types of areas. That's how they used to stop people building apartment buildings and other student housing and a whole host of other issues, right? And that needs to be
government
reformed.
regulation. Yeah,
that needs to be reformed 100%. There is no reason not to have apartment buildings and other things being able to grow up in these areas where there is demand for it, right? And where it is a residential zone, right? Like
if it's safe and people want it, why the fuck can't we build it? Like that's just like if it's safe, right? Like I understand that I'm like the
there's
ANCAP
problems with that though.
but
there's still problems with that. Chicago tried that when they built the high rises on the south side of the city. Chicago tried that. And the people still wanted it, but what you ended up with was a lot of mothers that were at the top because, believe it or not, rent went down if the father didn't live there. So the government encouraged single motherhood when the high rises were first built. But no, what I'm saying is
you're saying the government tried that, but then you're arguing something else.
Then go ahead, tell me what I was gonna say.
No, you're saying like you're talking about government intervention. What I'm saying is if a building like a shop, a fucking car rental agency, an apartment building, whatever the fuck it is, if it's safe and it's not going to harm anybody, why can you not get the building permit to build it? If you have the money to build it and you own the land and people want to buy it, what is the argument?
Zoning laws.
Well, the argument would come from gentrification, right? The argument is from the other side, from the NIMBY side, is that it increases gentrification, that it prices out the most poor among us. There are concerns with it.
Yeah, but those are bad
I disagree with those.
Gentrification is a good thing. I'll defend gentrification.
Yeah, gentrification is great. Brings in better jobs.
Brings in better jobs, improves schools, improves property values. It tends to be better overall for the community living there.
Well, yeah. Well, I mean, for the people that have like been able to cross that barrier.
Hang on, I already know this is going to happen. Corey, there's not a lot of data to suggest people are displaced by gentrification. There's just not. This is a common talking point, but there's just not a lot of data to
What do you mean there's not a lot of data?
Well,
I mean, look as closely as Chicago. Chicago gentrification happened, and people were misplaced from where they lived, majorly because the high rises were knocked down. But after it was gentrified, they were misplaced, and there was like not a lot of places to go because you knocked down. Wait, give me a second. You knocked down buildings that was hosting like many families, like, and all these people need to go find somewhere, and then gentrification happened, and now they're starting to push the people out, and they are, because the price of housing goes up.
The problem was they knocked down the high rises. They knocked down the.
I understand they knocked down the high rises.
Can I just point something out real quick?
But they did it to create neighborhoods, right?
Sprouticus, the high rises you're talking about, Cabrini Green, these kinds of Chicago high rises, these were gentrification projects themselves. Like, this was a section of the city cordoned off for black people.
It was public housing.
Okay, that might be the case, but like, it was to force black people out of a certain neighborhood so they could develop elsewhere.
Public.
It was
again
the high rises were built.
This is the problem with public housing, right? Is well, one of many problems, and maybe government could try again and it wouldn't be as bad. I don't, you know what I mean? Whatever. But it's always going to be an issue as far as I'm concerned from a rights-based perspective, of course, but also, you know, I think it's inefficacious. But the thing is that they have this really weird thing where they hate commerce when they do public housing projects. And so what ends up happening is you put a fuck ton of people into an area and you don't actually put business area in there, and you create zoning restrictions. And what you have is large buildings with a ton of single moms in it and a ton of like kids that don't have fathers at home. And then there's no businesses and there's all these other things that are zoned out. And it is a recipe. It is a perfect recipe for high crime and for all sorts of problems, the way that the government comes in and fixes these. And of course it causes problems, and then they try and refix it and rebuild and redo it, and then they use the same solutions over and over again.
Fabian, I grant everything Fabian's saying is true, by the by. Absolutely everything he's saying is true right here. But I'm wondering, like, what the alternative is. Fabian, like, let's just say we nix the public housing because you're looking at it from a rights perspective, right? Mm-hmm. What does a poor person do who doesn't have the money to rent?
Move.
Where? They don't have the money to rent. Where are they going to move?
Right. But see, here's the problem: is that your argument is based off of an assumption that the poor people are helped by the housing project. Right,
they're helped in that they get housing. That some of their problems help.
But except the problem is that they put people in hotels, they put people in public housing. They don't stay there. They end up back on fucking streets. They end up homeless again.
Like, that just means there's not resources and investment into those people. Like
we have to fix the root cause of the problem
alone. Sure. Fabian, you didn't answer my question. What does a poor person do who can't afford to rent?
Okay, so we get rid of all public housing, right?
Yeah, so and the poor person can't afford to rent. So
are we getting rid of all of the taxes that are associated with it?
Whatever you want.
Right, you literally move to someone that's cheaper. Assuming you don't have a family, assuming that you just can't afford to rent, making these assumptions that you just said that someone can't afford to rent. I'm assuming they don't have a family. But what I'm saying is, you literally move to someone that's got a cheaper.
Can I follow up then, Sproticus?
Okay, but I keep getting interrupted. Okay, it's cool.
But you don't have to move. Like,
if you live in New York City and you can't afford to rent in New York City, maybe you should live in New York City.
No, but here's the thing: is the trick is you don't have to move. If you get rid of public housing projects and you get rid of all of these unnecessary regulations in housing, the very nature of both of those things is that it increases the supply of housing.
Okay, it increases the supply of housing, but a person's still too poor to live there. What does he do?
Right. It reduces the price on rent, and it reduces the price on buying homes. So many of those people that are too poor are no longer too poor to be able to buy the housing.
I absolutely agree. Do you really think if we just got rid of like public housing and increased the supply, there would be nobody who would be too poor to afford housing?
I never said that, but what I'm saying is,
I'm asking you now either. Though,
let me try again, Fabian.
We don't have a system now where there's
a person is too poor to afford housing. Okay. All the supply, there's plenty of supply of housing, right? But he's too poor to afford it. He's living paycheck to paycheck. You know, he's barely getting by. He can't make it. What does he do?
He's living paycheck to paycheck. What can he do? Well, this is an individual problem. This is not a problem that the government steps in and magically solves with a fucking rent control or public housing or any of these things.
There are millions that have this problem.
But there are all kinds of unintended consequences that often make the problem worse because you're not actually focused on helping the individual.
I agree. There's consequences that make.
Let me meet this guy. Let me figure out what he's doing, and let me see how we can help solve this.
Fabian,
but you're talking about an individual. I don't know why this individual is so poor.
This is a societal thing. Like, there are millions that have this exact same circumstance. Is the answer really we just meet with all of them and figure out how they can better budget?
What do you? We just meet with all of them? I mean, it depends. It's an individual responsibility for you to be able to get your shit together. Okay. What are you talking about? These large sweeping solutions
there are those who
cause more problems than they solve, and they destroy rights and freedoms.
I was just going to say, unfortunately, there are those that are homeless due to some sort of circumstance in their life, or they're poor, hit with extreme poverty due to circumstances in their life. Like, you know, it's like, this sounds like a cliche, but like, you know, the widowed single mother whose husband died on the way to mailing the life insurance check. That sounds like a cliche, but that shit happens. But then there's also the poor or the homeless by habit. And these are the kind of people that, you know, whether they spend too much money on drugs or they're just like too whacked out or they just exhausted the charity of everyone else in their lives. And that is actually why there is a segment of the homeless population that is homeless, is because they've exhausted every charity of everybody that they already know. And so I'm sorry, like if you've ever had to deal with a fucking hardcore addict, you can give them all the fucking free anything you want in the universe. And all you've done is just lock them into their behavior forever.
We've enabled them.
Okay, Phil, what do you do about those people then? Do you just let them live on the street? Eat what I throw away?
To be frank,
shit in the shit and piss everywhere?
so what? Wait. What can you do to a self-destructive addict? What can be done other than fucking handcuffing them to a fucking bed? What can you do?
You can get them healthcare and access to other services.
Unfortunately, I've seen it in my time too many times. Unfortunately, fucking 3 hots and a cot at the local county jail is usually the only thing that straightens up a lot of addicts. It's a very hard thing to say, but it's true.
Wait, what you can do is you can provide.
Sorry, I'm just going off my personal lived experience.
What you can do is you can provide legal spaces for people to use drugs where it's not going to be criminalized, but they're not going to be put in jail for this, and where they can start to receive help, and they've got therapists there that they can talk to, and it's a more.
What do you do to people who don't want help, who don't want to get better? You'd
have a lot less of those. You'd have a lot less of people. Stop on drugs.
Like there's no solution.
I feel like we have to invent like the fictitious self-destructive person. There are people that just
trust
don't.
Me, I know fucking plenty of them. Okay, don't like this fictitious self-destructive person. You have not fucking met enough addicts in your life, my friend. I'm sorry.
I've met 2. I'll have you know.
You've met 2. A whole 2. Oh well, let us all
talk about jokes.
Okay,
don't get your panties in a twist. Okay,
I'm sorry. Let us all just
let me elaborate.
The prophet from Minneapolis.
The people from the cheap seats need help. No, what I mean is that not every homeless person. I'm trying to move up for you, buddy. Not every person that is homeless, not every person who struggles is just self-destructive and a drug addict.
I didn't say that.
Okay. We reduced it to that. I'm talking about people.
I'm talking about that specific case.
Okay, can we just leave off the specific case, because we could just acknowledge, like, yes, there's some
broadly
people
talk about homelessness.
Then there are plenty more that can be saved, right? There's plenty more that are stuck in these loops that can be drawn out of these loops. So we don't need to worry about the people who will never be fixed or saved, because by definition they're never fixable, they're never savable.
But that's Darwinism.
So let's just
so what's the issue with just telling these people to move, right? So if you're being pressed out of the area that you're living in,
destitute,
you absolutely
when you're destitute, you cannot, like, you lack resources to do things that we take for granted, like normal.
Are you talking about like actual?
So there's a problem,
like full on. You're on the street.
There's a laundry list of these reasons. And
what do we do about a person that doesn't have the money to move?
Let's give Aiko a
trying to isolate variables.
Listen, there's a laundry list of reasons.
Hey! I said Aiko.
There's a laundry list of reasons why you can't just tell somebody to move. For one, you're telling them to move away from whatever support system they might have.
Yeah.
So, okay, that person has to move. Okay, what if their support system is their nuclear family, like brother, sister, mother, father? Okay, that whole family has to move, right? But those families have families too. So then they've got to move.
No,
that's ridiculous.
No, that's a straw man. That's a straw man right there.
Rich, have you ever heard of Venmo?
Am I just going to be interrupted every single time I talk by Fabian Liberty's League? Is this how it's going to go the entire night?
Also by Wick. We're going to
Ico. That's a straw man in and of itself. Because to suggest that if someone moves, then they need to take their entire support system with them, would mean that anytime someone moved for a job, that their whole family would have to move, and their whole families have to move, which is asinine in and of itself.
No. They make individual decisions, right? And they factor in all of those complicated things when they make their decision to just move, right?
Okay.
But when someone on this panel says to this person that we've made up that, oh, well, they just move, we've then imposed that solution on countless people without knowing what their individual situations are.
Ico, you're trying to point out individual situations. We're talking about it as a whole. wait. So with that being said, would it not be better for someone to maybe live separate from their family, but now they've got a job and they can afford the housing that they're living in? Would it not be better for that to happen than to live in the vicinity of their family?
Again, it depends on the individual circumstances of the person, but there are plenty of people, and I've known plenty of people who thought that because they could make $10,000 a year more by moving out of a town, that they'd be net better off. And it turns out what they lost in terms of their support system, in terms of not being near family and friends and everybody else that they sort of grew up around with or whatever, caused more problems than it was worth to get that increase in salary or that reduction in rent or whatever other reason.
What problems did it cause? You said it caused more problems than it was worth. What problems did it cause?
Yeah, well, for one, they didn't have the support system that they would normally have. So when they ran in, like if they relapsed on a drug issue, or if they lost their job, or if they needed economic help, there was nobody there to help them, right? Because they left all of that behind.
You don't make phone calls. You can't transfer money electronically anymore.
No, you can't go crash on your sister's couch. That's 5
But you have housing you can afford. So you have housing to where you can crash on your own damn couch.
This is a dumb point, right? And Scott said
I agree, it's a dumb point. Yes.
No. Scott made that dumb point first. So thank you, Scott, for that. Oh, you can't Venmo anymore, right? So when we're talking about support systems, it's a lot more than just like getting cash. Like one thing is that you need childcare. A lot of people use their family as childcare. At my family,
valid point. That's a valid point.
It's a huge burden, right? Now, a person like me, a filthy socialist like me, what I would do is I would provide a free childcare for everyone, right? I'd make sure that we'd have high quality childcare across the nation, so that wouldn't be a problem.
Crazy talk.
But yeah, we can't. Yeah, I know, right? We have to look for the market for solutions. So I'm sure the market any day now will lower the prices any day.
Prime.
But in the world that we live in, and the world that we live in, how people deal with that is by using that support system that Aiko was talking about, right? The support system a lot more than just like helping people who happen to have like a drug issue, right? We got like locked in on that, but it's a huge expanse of all the things that having those people around gives you, right? Where you don't have to look to the market, you look to the people close to you to provide you with the help that you need. Okay. Beyond that,
another point. My bad.
Housing, right? So public housing is like bringing up how public housing in the U.S. I think is fair, right? Like how it's been historically in the U.S. is fair, but like we have to understand why it's like that, right? We've had a disinvestment in those public housing. That public housing has always, usually been racialized here in the U.S., right? And so, in the moment it's racialized, at the moment when we decide, do we need to put money into this, right? I think who was it? Maybe it was LSP, right? Talking about like how the housing was in Chicago. Was used as a gentrification scheme, right? To get black people out of one area, so to get white people in that area, right? That better area. Like, and then we have the real estate industry. But the real,
that's not necessarily true. That's not necessarily true.
One second. The real estate industry, right? The very popular estate lobby, lobbying again to make sure that we don't invest in these properties, right? All of that means that these projects are shitty. It's very clear, it's very fair to say these are shitty projects and shitty environments. And I believe you, Scott, if you lived in Section 8 housing previously, and it was really unfortunate, that's absolutely the case, right? But it's not the case in other nations, right? Other nations do have high quality public housing where we actually invest. So when I'm talking about public housing, right, and I'm all for this plan that Jackman was talking about, but again, I'm not surprised, I'm a dirty socialist, right? But like when I'm talking about public housing, I'm talking about something that's high quality that people literally fight to get into because it's that good, right? And we can do that. We can just decide to do that as a nation, as a people, decide that homeless individuals, that the homelessness in itself is a shame to our nation, and we'll just fucking end it, right? We'll put that investment to end it, and then it has knock-on effects. Now, will just providing public housing and all of homelessness? No, I actually won't do that, right? Because there's some people like Phil Kelly was talking about who are tough cases. But those are a different problem that we can handle individually. But on the macro sense, there's so many individuals who just need a helping hand, right? Or just people who don't want to be in that market housing trap with continuously rising rents. We can make a smart policy, and I'll even reach out, Scott. When you're talking about zoning policy, yeah, shit like that needs to go, right? I think there's some room for us to find common ground, but we can also have.
There's more room. There's more room. Stop Gish Galpin. Let me say this. So real quick, PrimeCayes, right? There's something. I
promise. I'll give you the space. Corey hasn't said anything.
Yeah.
Then I'll go right to you, Scott. I promise.
And I don't have much. I actually want to expand on your point, Prime, in terms of because
Jesus, it was already like 6 points.
Well, no, just to sort of hopefully clarify it, because I think public housing is sort of a vague, ambiguous term, and obviously I think it means something in the United States as it does in Canada. And so I think the way you frame it, at least. The way you frame it, Scott, of the government is somehow controlling housing, but the situation in Canada and our housing crisis, there's multiple factors, but a lot of the times our public housing, which I would agree overall that it's poorly implemented, and I would say it's poorly implemented because it's usually a government and private sort of cooperation, where it's yes, the government is subsidizing it, but due to the involvement of a corporation or a private entity, it becomes a convoluted contract. As in order to get this public housing built by a private entity, a lot of strings are tied to it, and therefore the government doesn't have control over it. And the private entity finds a loophole in the complicated contract, and is still able to increase rent, etc., and do all the other shady, I would say, business practices associated with housing. And so it's not like public housing here is it becomes like a public utility, as in Hydro-Quebec here, it's controlled by the government, it's a crown corporation, and it has pretty much complete control, and I would say it's pretty well run, as opposed to that doesn't happen in public housing, at least here in Canada, and I would suspect it's the same in the United States, where it's the result of this intermingling of the government and a private entity.
Okay, Scott, please.
Yeah, so this is the thing that upsets me so much about socialists, is because they're like communists, but they're even dumber, which is hard to do, to be more dumb than a communist.
You take that shit from him, Prime.
Just look at what they are doing to the black community, and they have been doing it as a form of the capitalist class, if you will, since the Industrial Revolution.
Luckily, you're there to protect them.
Yeah. I'm going to put on my white cape for a second, Wick, if you just shut the fuck up. So one of the biggest problems with housing in cities in general and homelessness in general is that we built this idea that the nuclear family was a good thing. And the nuclear family was literally the best of the worst choices. The nuclear family is not good. It's the lowest fucking bar to survive. We've understood for the entirety of the human species that you want your grandmother or your abuela or what the fuck ever in your home. You want a large extended family. And in many ways, in kind of suburban public housing ghettos in America, the black community has rediscovered this, right? And there is a lot of sharing in much larger families and things of that nature. But public housing and inner cities are not only, is it a myth that you need to stay there when you could move out into the country and find jobs and make a better life for yourself, but they also use government funds to trap you into fucked communities with shitty housing, with contracts that they do to make the community stay high crime and fuck, and make sure men aren't even in the fucking household, which doesn't even make the nuclear family. But if you just went out into the fucking country where you don't have city planning with these boxes that fucking people live in, and you actually have the capacity to have a large family, what you're talking about is a revitalization of that family network, of that social support system that iCal Rich had. Well, what he was describing is yes, you're connected to all these people, but you're connected in these nebulous ways by they live across the street, or they live 2 neighborhoods over, and we talk on the cell phone and things like that. What if you really want to save poverty and you really want to do well, move out of the fucking city into like suburbs or country and bring your whole fucking family and live together. Like fucking like the human species is designed to do, so you can have more children. You can have your grandparents step in when you're stressed out, so that you can be able to actually live a productive and helpful life. And instead, you're arguing for more of the destruction of the Black community and more systemic racism, so that we can keep them as Democrat voters living in fucking high crime boxes
are there time
that
limits on
fall
these
apart.
monologues?
Okay.
Are there like time limits on these monologues? We got other shit to do.
Sorry, I timed it, and I only took about 1/3 the time that PrimeCayes, the moderator, fucking took.
Yeah, goddamn right.
Fucking Prime.
But no, it's
Tell me
definitely
how
my
you really
fault.
feel.
But Scott, thank you for defending me from myself. All right, let's go to Sprouticus, and then Doobie, and then Iko.
Yeah. So, the Chicago. Going back to what you talking about, Prime, because I was trying to mention it when you said it. The Chicago, the high rises were, sorry, my jaw, was built all around the city. It wasn't contained necessarily to one side, and the land that the high rises were on was some of the most expensive land that Chicago had. And this was public housing. To say that they pushed them out so like white people could live there and put them in the high rises isn't necessarily true, because they used the most expensive land some of the most expensive land Chicago had, and they put the high rises on some of the most expensive land Chicago had. Chicago was sincerely trying to make it better. They failed at it, but they were sincerely trying to make it better. But no, I would disagree that Chicago was intentionally trying to gentrify the city based on putting them in the high rises, considering there was some of the most expensive land in Chicago.
If you're moving them from other desirable land, right?
It was less desirable land into more desirable land.
I'm saying, okay, well, we can get a debate on specifically like the
okay
on what happened on that particular thing in another time.
Okay.
But fair enough. Okay, thank you. We'll go to our friend Doobie, then Iko.
So, a few things. So, while you guys have been going on about this nonsense, I, being the generous person I am, have put together a whole plan to move the fuck out of California for a homeless person, if you like, okay? The average homeless person in California makes about $14 an hour on a good day. And so assuming they're working, begging, 8 hours a day, right? In about a week, they'll have saved up about $100, right? And if you subtract a couple $100 on the generous end for food, and like if they're not staying at a homeless shelter, maybe subtract another couple $100 for like staying at a cheap motel or something, a couple days out of the week. They'll have enough money to get either a plane ticket or a Greyhound bus ride to Iowa from Los Angeles with just what they've made panhandling, right? And then once they get there, they get a job at McDonald's. I looked this up, $14 an hour to start. It's a normal ass McDonald's job that anybody can fucking get, right? The rent is $500 a month for a 1-bedroom house, right? Not even an apartment, a fucking house with a yard. Right, $500 a month. If you have a kid, $2.75 an hour for that kid for childcare. So yeah, you're subtracting $600 a month out of that $14 an hour McDonald's job. Still leaves you with like $1,100 a month for everything else you want to do. Rent paid, daycare provided for. Right, so you can absolutely do this. Right, so I think that just telling people, hey, no, what if you're homeless? What if you have a kid? What if you did this and that? Well, what if you have to leave your support system behind? The support system is left you in a position where you can't afford fucking housing, right? And you're having to like surf from couch to couch, right? Well, yeah, maybe you need to grow up. Maybe if you can't compete in the place that you're in, move the fuck out, go somewhere else where it's more reasonable, where you can compete. I think it's totally ridiculous to reinforce this obsession with staying in these like fucking population hubs. Sometimes
illegal
it's just not a
immigrants
good
do
place
this
for you.
every day. Illegal immigrants
Exactly.
do this every day.
Doobie,
in America.
does
quite a few
homelessness
just off the
exist
rails.
outside?
They still do it to this day.
Does homelessness exist in the middle of the country?
No, it's too cold.
Wait, hold on.
Not to the same
people
level.
homeless in the
Not
middle of
to
the
the same level not to the same level, but I'm going to agree with you that a lot of that is because some of those states ship the homeless people to California because they don't want
That
them
was
there.
the point I was just about to make.
But
That's a perfect transition.
typically,
You
but
don't want to be
if you're
homeless
homeless
in Nebraska.
if you're homeless
It's
in a
too
place where
cold.
you can, if you're homeless in a place where you can very easily find rent for like $200 a month. Something else is going on. You're probably a drug addict or something.
Where are you getting a room for $200 a month?
Maybe go to literally look it up on Zillow. It's not that hard. The place that I found, which was me being generous, right? Me saying, hey, if you want a fucking house, that's 1-bedroom house for $495 a month, right? And you can find a lot. And that took me like 10 minutes to look up.
Give me
in
a
Iowa.
state. Iowa. Okay.
Yeah, but there are a lot of states like this. You can look to Oklahoma, Illinois. There are places in this country where you can find really cheap housing, really cheap rent.
Illinois. Okay.
Yeah.
What did you use to come up with this plan?
Yeah. Literally Zillow.
Yeah.
Okay, so
and then Wick.
So Doobie gave just a perfect segue to what I wanted to talk about, because he's talking about homeless people in California need to move to places where they're cheaper to live. Now, I agree that if if that works for you individually, if there's a host of qualifications that have to be made, but I think it can be a great decision for people to do that. But in fact, the opposite is happening. You've got these states usually they're red states that are sending their homeless people to California in order to get rid of them so they can improve their stats and make California stats worse. We know that happens. And I just want to respond a little bit to Scott's point about PrimeCayes maybe doing a little bit of a gishka out there, but the point is there are so many different considerations that individuals make if they're considering the just move and that fixes everything problem, that you do have way more than 6 points to consider when you're making a decision like that. And I think all Prime was trying to do is show that there is this long laundry list of those problems. I don't think he's asking anybody to respond point by point to all of those points.
Just real quick. That was my argument.
Can I say
that was my argument to LSP when he was like, well, what about this person? And I said, dude, there's so many fucking considerations.
No, well, I agree.
You need to look at it in individual.
There's always a lot of considerations. I think you could simultaneously hold that individuals should strive to improve themselves, and that as a matter of public policy, we should also strive to reduce homelessness. I don't think these are mutually incompatible.
So
Scott seems to hold that the answer really is just down to individuals who need to make better decisions.
So
that's not my position. I got to respond when people say that I'm wrong.
No, please,
just real quick,
for the love of God, because we don't have another 30 minutes.
If someone specifically attacks my argument, I'm just going to defend it super quick. Right?
That's
not my position. My position is one that when the government enforces
get the
positive,
in the way.
When the government enforces positive, right? There's tons of solutions that we quote unquote can do as a society that the market could do, but the market can't because of government regulation. For example, there's massive amounts of regulation on predatory loans, and yet if banks were allowed to make loans to homeless people that was contingent upon them getting a job and would then give them a large loan that had interest rates that said the moment you get a job, we give you what is called a homelessness loan, and then they can immediately get a place that they could live, and they can immediately get hot showers, and they can immediately buy clothing and things like that to make sure that they stay in that job and then pay off that loan. Like, that would be great. But the left will just be like, that's predatory. What we need is the government to step in and cause more fucking problems.
Well, listen, I've identified 4 issues that are being debated in this panel right now. And those 4 issues are public housing, rent control, zoning, and gentrification. And as it happens, I agree with Scott on 3 out of the 4. Rent control backfires all the time. I think zoning has created just terrible problems in terms of it's actually there to protect it. Zoning has the effect of helping the people who have the most resources and hurting the people who have the least. And zoning needs to be reformed heavily for that reason. And I agree that gentrification, if done well, is not a bad thing. It's a good thing, so long as you keep gentrifying. Like, once you're done gentrifying one area, you then go to the next, so that people don't get left behind, right? All 3 of those things, I find Scott very persuasive about. All right, so I'm not against him on this, but this the sticking point for me is on the just move argument. Is that Scott's talking about, I think we agree that you have to have that safety net of the extended family, not just the nuclear family, but the extended family too. But therein lies the problem, because when you move, and Scott said, okay, take the abuelo and abuela with you, that sort of thing. Okay, but when you do that, that abuelo and abuela have relationships with like maybe 5 other nuclear families who are in that area. So when they're moving with you, they're moving away from those 5 families, right? So okay, take those 5 families with you. Well, those 5 families themselves have extended families, and you see how it's not. All I'm saying is it's not a simple solution.
You're right, Cal Rich. I agree. We should have a mass exodus from cities like New York that are fucking trash.
There's obviously no one thing that we can fix to solve this problem. It's a huge problem, and I want I'm kind of frustrated because we keep on going to the homelessness issue, and that while that is an issue, there are so many other issues with housing and so many other effects. It doesn't just affect homelessness. It affects the standard of living for those who are renting or for those who are looking to move or buy property, or all these things. There are just so many different levels of things we could tackle here, right? Like we need to look at demolition controls, right? We need to look at the laws to put in laws in place. If you demolish housing, you need to build more housing, right? We need to have these kinds of controls in place. I think they're a great idea. They're a great thing we need to look to do because, as Spartacus mentioned a lot earlier in this panel, there could be a lot of problems when they just demolish high-rise buildings or demolish apartment buildings and things and have no replacements for it, right? So we need to have more controls in these things. Like, look, exclusionary zoning is a problem. There are a lot of regulations on getting permits to build in cities and other industrial and other residential areas that are tightly packed that we need to get rid of. But I think that the government does have the ability to successfully regulate in certain areas. You just need to do it right. It's not something that will be applicable in every situation, but there are plenty of situations where it can be. And demolition controls is one of those areas.
You gave one policy prescription that you said is a positive, and I can already imaginatively find ways that's going to fuck up, right? Like,
sure,
so
you can imagine anything. I can imagine while a dragon can come and destroy America,
right,
or
but this is the problem.
Aliens come and invade us, and oh my God, what are we going to do? We can imagine a lot of things, right?
Okay, that's wonderful that you attack that word specifically because you don't have an argument, but regardless,
that was your argument. I can imagine things that are problems with it. That was your argument.
You done? Because you latched onto a word like a fucking midwit. Let me actually make the argument as to why you're wrong. You brought up one. Okay, you brought up one policy that you said is something positive in which the state could intervene in order to fix this problem. And what you said is that when individuals or when companies, or you made it too vague that the state may control with like housing permits in some regard, might be what you might be talking about as well. But that when buildings are destroyed, other housing needs to go up. And so now what you're talking about is the state controlling what levels of housing exists in a specific area as a means of ensuring that we don't have like a demand crisis.
No, it already does.
Right. But that's the problem. That's why we have a fucking housing crisis, is because we need the state out of this fucking idea that like,
no, the solution isn't to get them out. It's to change it how they look. This is so binary. Like we just get rid of them all and nothing bad will happen, right?
It's not binary because you can't fucking think past binary. What I'm saying is if you have people where the state says you must,
is there any amount of state intervention you would be okay with in the housing market? Scott, any amount of state intervention
in the interim? Yeah, there are some things that I would allow in the interim. Well, let me finish first explaining why your idea is fucking stupid without you constantly arguing.
Why is demolition control?
Yeah, I'm trying to fucking explain to you and you keep interrupting.
You're failing. But go on.
I'm not failing. You won't shut the fuck up because you know that I'm about to crush your ass on your stupid ass policies.
For fuck's sake, just talk. Holy shit, just talk. Damn.
I'm fucking trying. So the state says Jesus Christ. If the state says if you demolish this, you must build other buildings. Well, they don't want to build other buildings. So what is going to happen? Well, you're going to have some instances where people don't destroy dilapidated structures that are unsafe because they're going to be forced to build other things. You're also going to have other instances where the reason that they want to destroy housing is because, believe it or not, in some areas, you can have too much housing and not enough business to bring people in to actually grow housing later. And so what you're going to do is you're going to stifle your economic growth. You're going to stifle that gentrification because you're going to be forced to build more and more housing, but there isn't jobs to support the housing for the people that exist. And so when the state starts interjecting with what amounts of housing needs to exist in a specific area, it's going to be ineffective and unable to actually control that. And what you're going to have is unintended consequences like dangerous housing and areas that have slow growth because they build housing when they don't need housing, when what they really need is businesses that bring jobs so that they can build housing later.
Okay, so one of the reasons that states need to have a lot of, well, maybe not a lot's the wrong word. I apologize. I'll take that. But a level of control in these things is because companies will engage in predatory practices where they'll buy up all these different houses, or because it's not making them money, they'll demolish all these things and not place any kind of replacement in order to reduce supply and drive up costs and things like that. And we can see this happen all the time, over and over again. Like, are you blind?
No, it's just not how economics works. Like businesses,
it's how it's been working.
That destroy their own property as a means of trying to.
If I may, this is one of those instances where if you've ever driven through Texas, the fact that Texas has very minimal building permits is actually a huge fucking advantage. If you've ever driven through it, you'll find on the side of every highway is basically an endless supply of fucking Cracker Barrels, Whataburgers, fucking Motel 8s, fucking every gas station, Buc-ee's. You have to stop at Buc-ee's. It's an American institution. But basically wherever there is a demand for a building in Texas, that fucker is going up before too terribly long. Now, I'm not saying it's, Texas is some perfect utopia, but just one thing that I think other states could use as an example. I got to say, Wick, you're absolutely correct. This topic is much more expansive than just homelessness. But here I am. I'm going to go back to homelessness again because there's just one other point I had to make. But no, and it's in regard to something Doobie said about California. To be honest, that is the one state can you think of any other state in the union where a person can live outside 365 days a year without the risk of exposure, whether cold or hot? I can't really think of any other place. So if you're a homeless person, there is not a single homeless person that is leaving California willingly. Because that is the place where you go if you're, I've heard the story many a times of, well, I'm here in Houston, but I'm going to try and hop the rail and try and get to LA if I can. And so they're always trying to get to California because the weather is the best there. I mean, Doobie, that's why most people fucking live in California.
This is why you go to South Central. They're like homeless encampments with fucking cardboard all over the street and little plywood houses on the fucking sidewalk. Yeah, of course.
California, super good to the homeless. Yes, it's unfortunate, but it's true, folks. And so, yeah, if you're a homeless person, you are not leaving willingly from California. They will have to drag you out forcibly and supplant you somewhere else. So California, I don't know what to tell you. This is one of the...
And other states are shipping homeless people there constantly, too.
Well, yeah, I mean, so there's a portion of this is they don't really have
is it shipping or they just hop in the rails?
Or the will to deal with these people, right? Well, so again, if you're gonna be homeless in a place, if you're gonna be homeless in a place where you can get rent for $400 or $500 a month, right? So that this implies that you can't hold down a job. Some other issue is happening. Either you're a drug addict, you have mental health issues. So they just want to get rid of you because when wintertime comes and you're there, you're probably going to fucking freeze outside, right?
Can I talk about something?
Or it doesn't have anything to do with that. It could be that you have faced some sort of financial crisis, which happens oftentimes in this country, right? Again, because socialists
file bankruptcy
charge. We have things like medical bankruptcy, right? People because we leave ourselves to the tender mercies of the market, people get hit with bills that they can't afford to pay, and then all of a sudden they have to choose and what exactly is going to go. Sometimes it's food. Oftentimes it's food. Oh, sure, yeah, just file bankruptcy, and that solves everything, folks. Guys,
no issues with that.
Bankruptcies,
of course there are issues, but if you're in a fucking place, you support homeless,
hang on, this is gonna be sweet. Or try to pay. Fabian, you support people filing for bankruptcy? You mean you support state-sanctioned theft of rightful debts? Why, I don't know what to say to you, sir. You better hand in your ANCAP card. I'm afraid that concession cannot be allowed, sir. You lover of taxation, you state lover, you.
Hey, Phil.
called out by the king of extreme. How's it feel, buddy?
My name is literally Fabian Liberty because I took it from Fabian Society. I literally advocate for, like, it's the brand is literally incrementalism. So yeah, under the current system, file bankruptcy.
Sure. What about student loan bankruptcy?
What you mean? The problem government caused?
This is like, hold on. So very rare. And if you've gotten a college degree, yeah, it's pretty rare. And if you've gotten a college degree,
I said student loan bankruptcy because it's not a thing, right? Because you can't.
I'm aware.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, I meant somebody being pushed into bankruptcy due to like a student loan. No. But again. So, but if you've gone and gotten a fucking degree and taken the loans out for this degree, and even still you're not able to pay your fucking bills, and you're gonna end up homeless over this fucking loan payment, there's some other issue going on, right? You're not. No. There's some other part of your life where you fail.
I'm trying so hard to find a job for the master's degree I have in underwater basket weaving. And so that's why I don't have a job, and I'm having to file bankruptcy.
You know what, PrimeCayes? I'm actually going to solve this problem. So here's what you do. I'm going to put a little agorism in there, and maybe it's a little bit shifty. Maybe it's a little bit illegal. So here's what you do. If you're genuinely homeless, right? All you need is 2 witnesses that you are homeless to write statements for you, and you can go to the government and you can move into Ohio, just like he said. You can get a job, you can get a place, and then all you need is 2 witnesses to say that you were homeless for an extended period of time. And you know what they will do? They will forgive you bad grades. Even if you dropped out of college and you completely failed all of your classes, if you were homeless for a period of time over 1 year and you can get 2 witnesses to write that you were, even if they're your fucking friends and they're just lying and they don't even know, then you can get that documentation and you can start the process all over again. And then you can get more government loans to finish your fucking degree you dropped out of once you get your shit back on your feet, and you can postpone all of those debts and you can actually get the fucking degree. And then you can get a better fucking job. There are answers out there.
Or you could just, as
game
a society,
the fucking system if
the
you have to.
Pays for that. Pays for your college, right?
That's subsidization of rich people by the poor. I didn't realize that you hated the poor so much.
The worst fucking argument.
Hey, I wasn't rich when they subsidized my happy ass to go to college, and I fucking appreciated it.
The overwhelming majority of loans are held by people who make 6 figures.
Multi-millionaire's kid might maybe take advantage
of
public schools. Hold on. Rather than sending their kid off to like some private school, right? Some private institution, right? They'll send them kids to public schools. Okay, great. And then some kid might take advantage of it. Okay, hey, that's okay, right? Because for every one of those rich kids, right, there are hundreds of other individuals, middle class, working class individuals who will be able to take advantage of college that wouldn't be able to do it otherwise.
That's a lie.
I don't give a shit.
That's a lie.
Rich kid
That's a lie. That's a lie. That's a lie. The majority of student loan debt is held by people that make 6 figures.
Oh my god,
Fabian.
It's literally like free college is literally taxing people, blue collar workers, and giving money.
The issue is the issue is the reason.
I have to admit he's right.
Fabian, okay, he's right. So he's right, but he's wrong at the same time. Fabian, the reason the majority of student debt is garnered by people who make more than 6 figures is because these are probably people that have student debt up to like a master's or a doctorate degree. And so I don't think Prime is even saying that like a master's or a doctorate should be free. I think Prime's saying the bachelor degree. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, Prime.
Yeah, I mean, if you're talking about bachelor's degrees specifically, then that changes the argument, and then we can have a totally different argument about the McDonaldization, of academia. Like in 1890 and even in the early 1900s, you had to prove that you were fluent to read and write Latin in order to get into a university.
Yeah, but they did that
like our current university system are full of
they
useless fucking
basically people who just can hold a pen or a pencil now.
Like anyone that has like I have 2 undergrads, right, in fucking social sciences. They're useless degrees. I didn't learn shit in college. You know why? Because you can learn more in fucking like 6 months on the internet than you ever
don't have to tell us you didn't learn shit in college, buddy.
It's not even that. Like I just got to say, it's a lot like The Incredibles. If you've ever seen The Incredibles, there's a great fucking line in there where saying everybody is special is just another way of saying nobody is special. If everybody's got a college degree, then what the fuck is the actual value of it at that point? You've inflated it to that level. It's basically, yes, it's an expansion of the high school diploma at that point. Let's be frank, there's a couple of college kids that just need to be babysat for a few extra years.
We should have special people, right, who have special statuses, who get education, and the rest of them can be quote unquote blue collar, right? And salt of the earth. And they don't have to deal with that, all right? Like, we'll just have it for a special class of individuals who gets the education. Great idea. Wonderful. Love it. Corey, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say,
well,
Scott,
I'm sorry, but if you have a job that's connected to a degree, you have a job that's not connected to your degree, I'm sorry, you have spectacularly failed as an economic actor.
No,
you just have. I'm sorry.
Maybe humans are more than economic actors, KOE. Maybe. Not everything just boils down to, like, you know, just your GDP output. Maybe there's more to humanity than your contribution to GDP.
There's not more to life than money and hoes.
Listen, hold on a second. The majority of CEOs in this country have liberal arts degrees, which means that they're not doing what they went to college for, but they're way succeeding above what their college degree was for. So,
to be fair, a majority of CEOs also have MBAs.
And
I was just about to say, like, their degree is still connected to what they do for a living.
But you don't do.
In fact, your minor in something else
school is about business. Your undergraduate is about broader education.
What I would say, Scott, if I just can get my point out quickly, I'll try to be as brief as possible. Like, so if you, it's very interesting to me that you say you have 2 undergraduate degrees and you characterize them as useless, and that's sort of an argument you put forth as, you know, sort of the problems of academia, and, you know, there's certain aspects of academia that are maybe useless. I would say that's more, to me, a testament that you don't know how to take advantage of an education. That's to me like someone saying, you know, I've been to the gym, you know, dozens of times, never got anything from it. Maybe you don't know how to extract something from academia appropriately. And if you've gotten 2 degrees and you describe them as useless, that's a testament to you not knowing how to get an appropriate university education.
I easily could get a government job, right? As someone that's prior service in the military and has a service-connected disability and 2 undergraduate degrees, I could easily get a GS7 to like GS10 job. I'd be like, so long as I qualify, I'd be first on the list. It would not be difficult. I chose to be a Twitch streamer. But what I'm talking about is not like stand ground or standpoint epistemology of like using my life experience as an analogy to prove that they're useless. I'm simply saying, yeah, I have these degrees, and I'm not saying they're useless as economic factors out into the world, though I would also make that argument. But what I'm specifically saying is that what has occurred to the dumbing down of academic institutions in America after so many government subsidies is atrocious, because the level of education that you get in undergrad in humanities in America today is useless. It is not, that doesn't teach you how to think. It barely, most people, when I was in my capstone class at Virginia Commonwealth University, right, for psychology, history of psychology, we were asked, who here has heard of Plato's allegory in the cave?
Of the cave, yeah.
Out of 85 roughly people, somewhere around there, it was me and one other person. If that doesn't tell you how fucking useless that degree is, that like basic philosophy,
that tells me nothing. That tells me that the students who are learning. I guess what do you want them? What do you want taught in college?
There's a pretty big aggregate of the entire university there.
Fuck. Let me talk, Scott. What do you want?
I can't see you, so it's hard to.
Since you think these are useless, what do you want
to get your face on camera?
I'm drawing beautiful cities for y'all, Scott. Since what do you want taught in college if you think these are useless? What needs to be taught specifically that you want taught?
Like if I was building my own university?
Are you saying they're useless? And what they teach you now is useless. What do you want them to teach? What are they teaching now that's useless? And what do you want them to teach?
People should learn marketable skills they can use to producing an income for themselves and their families. Right? That's very simple.
I mean, that would be part of it. That'd be good. I think you would have to learn writing far, like the standards would have to be raised. I think for the most part, I think a lot of the ideas of the curriculum aren't that far off from what should be taught, but the standards are so fucking low. It's atrocious.
Yeah, I think if you're like a millionaire, you can afford to like learn for learning's sake, right? And get really deep into philosophy and waste $50,000 a year learning about basketball or whatever. Go for it, right? But don't do that when you just get in when you're building your life. Like do that later.
You know, it's the hardest part of an Ivy League education.
Finish your point, but then you did interrupt Corey, so I want to go back to Corey after that, and then Aiko, and then Wick.
Okay. When he describes them as useless, he says that they don't teach you how to think. In what specific context? Like, what is it you specifically want them to think about? Like, is that just building marketable skills? That's like super broad, right? They're teaching you like specific things about the field you're majoring in. What is it that is lacking?
I think if you have a humanities degree, right?
I do.
And you graduate, if you're unable to be able to very quickly, I would say, produce a 30 to 50 page paper with 30 to 50 citations. If you can't do that in a week's time and have it be cogent, I think that degree is not done its job.
And I would say, want people to write essays.
Really? That's what we're going to do? Like, you're going to ask for specific examples and create an entirely new topic and then attack what I say and like demean it instead of like, taking this seriously?
Okay, no, this is
a stupid fucking debate tactic. Like, what are you, fucking Vosh? Like,
okay, never mind. Let the other guy go.
Okay, let's go.
I see you got some.
I give you one example, and you're like, you want them to write essays?
That was your best example?
Like, no, that's one example.
Corey is nice and beautiful. Let's go, have him go first.
Okay, I'm sorry, Corey.
Aiko, Wick, and KOE.
You're too kind, Prime. Much appreciated. I'll try to do my best to be brief. But I'm very much on the same page as you, Scott, in terms of like, a good grounding of philosophy is great. I have to assume, or I'm fairly certain, you've read The Closing of the American Mind by Paul Bloom. Is that a book familiar to you or not?
The Closing by Bloom, no, not specifically that one.
So I would.
I was thinking of sorry, hold on. I'm thinking of another book. Go ahead.
And also, sort of again to your point, not only did they write this book, The Closing of the American Mind, which is pretty notorious, I would look it up. They also have what I would say a very great translation of the Republic of Plato, very much like Greek word for word translation. And like, yes, they very much make the argument actually in favor of education, of like a good grounding in the, classical liberal arts is good. That's a testament to education. So like, if you want to more or less reframe it as like certain fundamentals should be taught and everyone should have access to these fundamentals to a classical liberal education, I'm all in favor of that. But then just to say sort of like, it seems like you just want to abolish it all, or like, that it should only be reduced to economic output, I think is not the greatest.
Okay,
that's newbies. That's newbies.
Okay, so I want to get back to what Scott was talking about before that, because really I think the problem that Scott points out is that when we're putting everybody, like the whole if everybody's special, then nobody's special sort of thing. I think those resources need to be redirected, because if we had effective universal pre-K and followed that up with solid elementary education in a way that every child in America had equal access to that kind of education, they would be able to compete more universally for those spots in colleges. They would be more prepared for college when they were going in, and you wouldn't have to lower standards at those levels. Like, for instance, if you're
universal
looking at
pre-K is bad. Like most of the research points out.
But hold on, let me finish making my point before you attack it. Because what I'm talking about, I mean, you can come up with a different way of solving that problem. That's fine. I mean, I'm open to that. But all I'm saying is that when you look at, say, affirmative action at the college level and at the high school level, and maybe even a little bit younger than that, it backfires, because then what you end up doing is you end up taking a group of people and putting them, mixing them with a group of people who have advantages over them, and then you're setting them up to fail, right? But at the pre-K level and at the elementary level, when you give them the resources that all of those other people that they're supposed to be able to compete with, then you're doing the opposite, because you're raising them up to a level where they then can compete at, they can get into those prep schools that prepare you for college. They can get into those colleges because they've been given the resources that they lack at the early level. When you give them nothing until they're 18 years old and then you suddenly put them into a college program that their test scores don't show that they're ready for, it backfires entirely. So all I'm saying is, you might not like universal pre-K, but all I'm saying is that there needs to be some sort of focus on early childhood education that tries to fix the problems at that level, rather than waiting until they're 18 before implementing solutions.
Universal pre-K, like the data, like I'll just respond quickly.
We just have very amount of time left, so I need to hit
universal pre-K. Universal pre-K is not good. The studies show that it doesn't work that well. Okay. And I'll just quote the end of a Hayek quote to answer all of those, which is that the socialists, when we tell the socialists that we don't want the government to produce grain, it is as if we think that we want people to starve. Like, I don't want the government involved. Doesn't magically mean that like we shouldn't focus on things.
Beautiful. Okay. Except you say that housing shouldn't be a right. All right. Let's go to our friend Wick, please.
Okay.
And then KOE, and then I'll speak.
This has gone far, far away from the initial topic at hand. I'll use my closing to address the initial topic at hand. When it comes to education, when it comes to college education, yes, there are problems with academia right now. One of the major issues is men are fleeing the field, right? Men specifically are just leaving academia. They're not getting degrees. They're not getting that level of education. Is going to create a severe wealth gap in the coming future, because again, we can see that college educated individuals and things do tend to have more earnings, more spending power over the long term and things like that. So we're going to have to deal with that at some point. I think that at the end of the day, education should not be just about an economic consideration. I haven't done anything with my degree, but I don't regret getting it. I don't think it was a silly thing to invest in or a silly thing to do. It did teach me a lot about how to learn, how to think, what to go, like how to examine certain topics in a way that's nuanced and interesting. And now, obviously, that wasn't the only thing that taught me that, but it really did help. And I think expanding the access is a good thing. So.
AOE, then I'll speak.
All right. Well, first of all, Prime, I've been wanting to say this all night. In blackest day, in brightest night, beware your fears made into light. Let those who try to stop what's right burn like my power, Sinestro's might. Sorry, I've been waiting for a good segue into that. So,
was that a good segue?
Yeah, I was gonna say, like, your definition of good segues pretty loose.
Hey, what can I say? But anywho,
your definition of a camera is pretty loose too.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Oh, damn. But I was gonna say it was something I got in a little earlier, but unfortunately these days the hardest part of attaining an Ivy League education is the admittance process. It's not what you know, it's who you know, in that kind of instance, and it really does kind of call into question the overall value of that. And there was also the idea of, I'm sorry, I'm going to stick with this because there's so much training involved, so much time, so much effort, so much energy, so much money that goes into getting a degree that and I'm not saying this is like an attack on you. I'm just saying this is kind of general statement that, like, if you are out there and you have a degree and it has nothing to do with how you make a living and how you make your money, I view that as being a spectacular failure as an economic actor, just because of all the time, the effort, the energy, the money, the early life that you had to put into it. So, like, that's one thing that you got to keep in mind. Like, I've talked to dudes who they majored in fucking Sumerian. They majored in a 6,000-year-old dead fucking language, and they're shocked at their waiting tables. Okay, like that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about when you're trying to get to a degree that maybe doesn't have the value that you're going to be putting your time, effort, energy, and money into. And the last thing that I would say, and this is to Aiko's point, talking about how important pre-K is, pretty much any paper on early psychiatry that I've seen is the best and the most important indicator to indicate that your child's not going to fall into some sort of criminality is to make sure that they are agreeable with their own peers by the time they're 5. If you can do that, you've basically done like 80% of your job. After that, you just got to kind of get them to 18, make sure they're fed and all that stuff and all, like after that, you're basically after that, you're a fat landlord. But, or at least in my case, like, yeah, my kid's already a better person than me, so I'm just a fat landlord at this point. But yeah, so that's the one last thing I wanted to talk about, just the utter importance of that early education. That's the biggest predictor of criminality. And with that, I yield.
Let's go to LSP, and then Sprouticus. We have very little time left, so keep that in
Very
mind.
little time. Damn, that doesn't leave a lot of time to interrogate somebody's position. In fact, instead, I want to do it. I rather resent I feel like there's a lot of anti-intellectualism just coming from like the right side of this, but it is an undeniable empirical reality that the better educated you are, the better off you are in life. And this is not just exclusive to STEMs. In fact, I might argue as STEM fields become more competitive, it's less likely to be exclusive to STEMs. It's less likely to be such a profitable career. Rather, if you drop out of school, you don't get a lot of money. If you are a high school graduate, you'll learn more than a dropout. You get a college graduate, you'll learn more than a high school graduate. Typically, this is true. Broad strokes. Now, of course, Phil can always find the odd person who majored in Sumerian and is waiting tables for a living. That's the case with anybody.
A lot of Phil majors.
You can find a lot of brilliant people who've squandered their potential. And that might just be because of they've made some bad decisions, and that's just unfortunate. But what you want to do with society is structure it so that people are best capable of fulfilling their entire potential. So when I look at Scott's idea for the world, and I'm fast forwarding, not transitioning period, what does Scott actually want if he had the power to create the world as he wanted? I'm picturing a world where there is no public education, and a person cannot afford to go to school, and a person is basically condemned for the rest of their life waiting tables because the admittance for college is so expensive. The cost to go into school is too expensive that you've created like a permanent underclass that is perpetually defeated by a lack of resources. That's my issue. If you want to say I'm strawmanning or attack it, knock yourself out.
You're obviously strawmanning it.
And before then, we gotta make sure our friend Sprouticus, and then we'll transition to our next topic.
So Wick, so you said that men are leaving academia. And you said this is a bad thing. It's going to create this giant wealth gap. I don't see that. You can leave academia to go become a welder. You can leave academia to go
That's not
learn.
happening, though.
I'm sorry, it's not happening.
Yeah,
So,
it's not like
Wick is correct.
Yeah, look, on average, right? Like in the aggregate, having a college degree opens a lot of doors to you socially and financially, right?
It does, but if you decide you don't want a college degree and you want to become a welder, you want to become a mechanic, these things don't require college degrees, and it'd be quite worthless.
Transition to these, then fine. But again, we're not seeing this happen. We're not seeing them leave academia for bountiful jobs in construction or bountiful jobs in these other fields. We're seeing them leave academia, and then we got the deaths of despair, the opioid crisis, and all these other issues that are just slamming them, right? Non-college educated men and women in the United States are just getting slammed by these problems, right? And it's an issue.
Okay, I like to see a study that you have, because I didn't know.
There's
I
a book
know that
called "Deaths of Despair" and the Future of Capitalism.
When was it written?
When was it written? By two Stanford professors. It's a wonderful read.
Okay, so I might read it sometime, but it's not on this panel.
I'll let you're not going to read it on the panel.
No, I'm not going to.
I'll let my man Doobie have the last word. Go ahead, Doobie.
Yeah, I just wanted to, because I feel like people really hit on the fact that men are getting degrees, right, in like lower rates over the years. But if you actually look at like non-degree credentials, right, like whether they're it's like a plumber's license, a fucking contractor's license, etc. Right, that you actually see over the years that men are actually getting way more of those. Right, the amount of those that the public has in general, but especially men, has exploded over the last like 15, 20 years. Right, and I'm an example of this. Right, I don't have a college degree, but I have an insurance license, and I have like 3 other credentials that are not degrees. Right, that I got through just certification courses that I've gone through to help my career. Right, so all these kind of like non-degree credentials can open up huge job opportunities to people, right? So just the fact that men are like leaving academia or whatever doesn't mean that they're just less educated and they're going to do worse going forward. You can get a plumber's license, make $100,000 a year, right? Like you don't need to go to college to make that kind of money.